Okay, welcome back. We're going to be talking about stress and hormones today. Ever feel wired but exhausted, like your brain won't shut off, but your body's running on empty? That might be cortisol messing with you. So let's talk about what is cortisol. Cortisol is your main stress hormone, and it's made by the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands sit on top of your kidney, and they produce cortisol in response to a fight or flight response. Now, we make a small amount day to day as it helps you to wake up and focus and deal with the day's challenges. But when the stress is constant and you're making cortisol at high levels, that is where the trouble starts. Hi there and welcome. I am Aisha Durrani and I'm so glad you found your way to my channel. If you're here, chances are you're looking to learn more about managing stress and improving your health, and you're in the right place. I'm a naturopathic doctor practicing in Toronto, and like many of you, I've faced my own health challenges and have experienced firsthand how stress can affect your well-being. So let's get right back into it. So in your brain, there is a small almond-shaped part called the amygdala, and it's your inbuilt threat assessment scanner system. It constantly monitors your environment for danger, and if it senses a threat, whether it's a real life-threatening threat or a non-life-threatening threat, it triggers your fight or flight response, and then it sends signals to the organs to release stress hormones like cortisol. Now, I want to draw attention to when I said real threat and non-life-threatening threats. So real threats are something that will end your life in the next few moments, like a tiger coming at you, someone with a gun, and that's where you need fast-acting solutions. Non-life-threatening threats are things like deadlines, hard conversations, unhappy circumstances. Both of them register internally as a threat. So the body really doesn't have a difference or way to know the difference in between these. They both will kind of internalize as, okay, there is a threat outside, we gotta move. Now, cortisol is one of the main hormones that is made under the fight or flight response, and its main function is to prioritize your body's function to respond to an external threat and to pull away from all low priority tasks. Tasks such as digestion, hormone function, immune system regulation, blood sugar regulation, and so much more. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into how cortisol, this regulates hormones that are important to us, such as insulin, thyroid, and how it affects our mood and sex hormones. Okay, beginning with cortisol and insulin's relationship. So we all hear of insulin when we talk in terms of blood sugar regulation, and we really want to break the science down today. Cortisol has been known to impair insulin receptor signaling, which can lead to insulin resistance. So there's a lot of this term insulin resistance, especially in the female hormone world, and also if you're, moving towards prediabetes and then diabetic. So let's first get what is insulin. It's the hormone that's made in response to sugar entering our system. So let's say you eat an apple or a plate of pasta, and now you have sugar molecules entering your blood. Your pancreas then secrete insulin, which will command where the sugar goes. So in essence, insulin opens the door for sugar to rush to other places such as your muscles, so it can be used for energy. However, when the signaling is impaired, also known as insulin resistance, it doesn't open the door just as well. This means there's a lot of sugar kind of hanging around in your bloodstream after a meal, which can be detrimental. Now, cortisol is a double-edged sword. Not only does it make the insulin resistant, meaning the sugar sits in your bloodstream longer, but it also gets sugar from other organs to be dumped into the blood, such as from the liver. It does this because it is perceiving a threat and it wants you to be able to have resources to quickly mobilize and get yourself out of that fight or flight. So really what cortisol is acting at that point is it's trying to give you a chance at fighting and at survival. So it's kind of like when you are going for an intense workout, you might eat some carbs before to give you a carb boost, so to speak, so you can potentially have a good workout. And that's the same analogy with where your body wants you to have access to carbs or sugar to be able to fight a potentially life-threatening situation. But what happens when you're not physically fighting a situation, more so you're fighting it mentally? The excess sugar now has no way of being burnt off, and so what often happens is it gets converted to fat. This is where we see folks put on the stress belly, gain weight, and can develop conditions such as fatty liver, cholesterol concerns. So let's recap. Chronic stress increases insulin resistance, leading to higher blood sugar levels and an increased risk to metabolic issues like diabetes, weight gain, and cholesterol. So now we're going to move on to discuss how high levels of cortisol can make fat burning harder. Now that we've taken a look at how cortisol impairs insulin signaling, we're going to look at how chronic stress, and by means of that, high levels of cortisol, can slow down thyroid function and signaling. So the thyroid hormone regulates our metabolism, right? So it's how we burn our calories. It also regulates our heart rate, our digestion, our mood, our memory, fertility, and body temperature. So it's one of our master hormones. It is also in charge of the rate at which cortisol is cleared and removed from your body. So when the thyroid is under functioning, it can cause cortisol to be cleared slowly from the system. So to give you a perspective, let's take an example of two people. One person has a normal functioning thyroid system, and they clear the cortisol after a stressful event at the normal rate, leaving them feeling regulated and emotionally in control. The second person with an underfunctioning thyroid goes through the same stressor event as the first person, meaning they make the same amount of cortisol, but they have a harder time clearing it from their system at the same rate. So this leaves them feeling emotionally unregulated for longer, and this could present as symptoms of anxiety, irritability, depression. So cortisol can do two things. It can, in terms of signaling to the thyroid gland, it can slow down the production of thyroid, and it reduces the conversion of your thyroid hormones to its active form. Now, this study of young adults found high levels of cortisol had reduced thyroid function, suggesting the impact of stress on thyroid. This other interesting study found that people with adrenal tumors, meaning they had a tumor in the adrenal gland, and remember the adrenal gland is where we produce cortisol. So they were producing an excess of cortisol and hence had lower thyroid hormone levels. But here's the interesting part. After the tumors were removed, the cortisol levels dropped back down to normal. They found that their thyroid function also dropped back down to normal. So this shows that chronic stress and high cortisol can suppress thyroid function. Now moving on to how cortisol can disrupt sex hormones. So stress can disrupt reproductive function and hormonal balance, leading to issues like irregular periods for women, low libido, and fertility issues. In this study, 259 women without any pre-existing hormonal concerns were followed over a period of 2 years for 2 consecutive menstrual cycles to monitor how high levels of daily stress affect hormones. And they found that it suppressed LH signaling, estrogen and progesterone production, and that it suppressed ovulation. So when a woman doesn't ovulate, she can have a prolonged or missing period. If she doesn't ovulate, she can't conceive because no egg was released. So to recap, chronic stress can lower LH signaling, which then commands the body to ovulate. It can reduce progesterone levels, impacting menstrual cycles, leading to PMS, fertility concerns, irregular periods. Now let's move on to how stress can affect men and testosterone levels. In this study, they're looking at testosterone levels under stress in medical students. They were measuring their saliva 2 months before the exam. And it's interesting because the evidence is clear that it reduces the testosterone levels in women. So as stress increases, testosterone reduces in women. However, in men, it doesn't seem to be linear, which is interesting. So what they find is that right before the stressful event, testosterone levels can increase, And if that stress continues, it can plummet or follow a U-shaped nonlinear fashion. So short-term stress can cause a temporary increase in testosterone, and this is likely due to the body adapting to the response. But if this stress becomes chronic and it stays consistent, then we notice that the testosterone levels go down, and this is primarily due to elevated cortisol levels. And in other ways, they're also looking to other factors. And why I like this study is because they're also looking at the mental emotional states of the male participants. And we're also looking at, how they manage stress emotionally and aggression and those kind of factors. And they find that that is where it might differ. So if they manage it well, then their testosterone might not necessarily plummet, but more research needs to be done. They also talk about the traits of like extroversion and openness to an experience can negatively or positively correlate with testosterone levels. So I think that that's pretty interesting. And they were also looking at personality traits. So this is a more psychiatric based paper. So that's where I think it's important to understand the mindset is probably a very important key element to understanding hormonal suppression levels. And then I jumped to find another paper because I was really interested in the anticipatory stress. And over here, they did find that when cortisol increases initially, they do find that the testosterone levels do fall. And again, with research will give us kind of a starting point of understanding human, who is such a complex model. But this part becomes a little bit consistent, especially in the initial phases of stress. So to recap, long-term stress can lower testosterone in both men and women through cortisol-driven mechanisms. This suppression has significant effects on male and female health, behavior, and well-being. Now we're going to discuss the connection between stress and our sleep hormone melatonin. So it's pretty common to experience sleep disturbances when you're going through a stressful period in your life. This could be an argument with a boss or a spouse or a difficult situation such as a health or financial crisis. But have you ever wondered why? So elevated nighttime cortisol levels have been associated with increased nighttime awakenings and reduced sleep quality. So you find that you're not sleeping as deeply. Now, cortisol is a hormone that follows the sun's curve. When you wake up in the morning, as the sun starts to rise, cortisol starts to rise and peaks kind of midday when the sun is the highest. And as the sun goes down, its levels start to come down. But what happens when cortisol levels stay high in the evening and at nighttime? So you're making a lot more cortisol and it can keep you awake more often, and that's where you have trouble sleeping. This is also where the effects of blue light come into play. So you might have seen these blue light blocking glasses around. Light is information for your body to wake up and to fall asleep. And the research suggests that exposure to blue light, especially in the evening hours, will stimulate continual cortisol release into the night and disrupt sleep. So the two key takeaways from the research would be to have an unwinding routine in the evening where you manage your stress actively and turn down bright lights or consider ways to block blue light. There are now settings on your phone devices to allow us to do this, as well as on TV and laptops. I use an app called Flukes that automatically adjusts my monitors to the correct lighting based on where the sun goes down in the location I'm in. But we try to have the lights turned on dim when the evening starts to settle in. Okay, now let's talk about how cortisol affects our mood and motivation hormones. So stress can suppress dopamine, which is our motivation and pleasure hormone. Chronic stress levels can interfere with serotonin production as well and reduce its availability to the brain. Cortisol decreases the number of serotonin receptors in the brain, making it harder for serotonin to have the usual positive effects on mood and social connection. So when you have low serotonin levels, that can contribute to difficulty managing your emotions, which can lead to conflict and strained relationships. In this study, it was noted that lower levels of serotonin made it harder for people to form and maintain social connections. So all this to say that stress can cause a cascade of hormone shifts. Understanding this would give you power and figure out techniques how you could manage and regulate your stress. So managing stress isn't just about feeling better in the moment, it's about keeping your whole body system balanced. Now, I don't mean for this information to overwhelm you by any means, but rather this is for you to be empowered and to be able to move in a powerful way. Learning to regulate your stress is going to be one of the most powerful tools we have for improving all our health metrics. And there are a varying range of techniques for you to be able to regulate yourself, from exercise, yoga, aromatherapy, breath work and meditation, spending time in nature, journaling, or even just deep intentional rest. What matters most is finding what works for you. Stress management isn't about eliminating the stress entirely, because let's be real, life will always be stressful. It's about building resilience so that your body and mind can respond in a way that supports your health rather than working against it. So I invite you to explore and start with just one small shift today, because every little step you take towards regulating stress is a step towards greater energy, clarity, and overall well-being. Techniques I have used and held on to for over 10 years include a daily morning yoga routine, meditation and gratitude in my day, consciously nurturing social connections, nature walks, and journaling. And through trial and error, I realized that fast-paced activities like running and kickboxing don't work well for my nervous system, and this could be fine for another person. So we all have very unique bodies and need a very tailored treatment approach. This is why I pursued studying naturopathic medicine, to figure it out for myself, but hopefully you won't have to, and instead you can use this information and perhaps connect with a naturopathic doctor. In my practice, we began by assessing the individuals to identify their unique stresses in their life. And often we found in that assessment, many people aren't fully aware of the stress they're experiencing or its root causes. So from there, we then began to develop a personalized lifestyle plan that outlines the resources they need to manage their stress. This could include skills like productivity, communication, time management, emotional regulation, or personal development. And these are very real conversations we must have in order to gain our health back. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to stay updated with more helpful education. I will see you in another video.